Hello, and how you doing? Team Business Forum. We are here with Marc Ostrofsky. This is a very special interview that Marc's agreed to do. Marc is the guy behind Business.com. He was in the world records for selling domain name for the most amount of money. And Marc just wrote a book. It's called Get Rich Click, and he's going to be teaching people how to make money online through some of his stories and interviews that he's done. So, Marc, welcome.
How are you?
So Marc, you've been around for so long, so many businesses. What was your first ever business?
Oh gosh, I was doing the newspaper route when I was a kid, and the lemonade stand. And actually, Lemonade Day is coming up next week as a thing to teach kids about entrepreneurship. You name it. If I found a way to buy and sell and make money in the middle, I was there. So a lot of your followers are going to relate to that. I was in the exact same shoes from the day I was born. I'm telling you, I'm an entrepreneur and I love to make money. It's a game.
So that's great. So, like, how did that, lead to your next thing?
Well, I think what I teach people is know what you don't know and hire your weaknesses. So you can, even if you don't have money, you can find people to partner with that will be your partner. If you're excited and enthusiastic and have thought through your business idea and your business model, you can be successful. So people will gravitate towards a positive thought leader. And that's what you need to be if you're an entrepreneur. And people will either give you money to help you, they'll give you their time, they'll give you their input. They'll kind of like I'm doing. I like to help people think through their stuff when I have the time to do that.
Okay. So we talked about your first ever business. What was your first big one?
Telecommunications used to be owned by one company, AT&T, and then they deregulated. When they deregulated, it went to a bunch of different companies, and no one kind of owned the payphone industry. And if you looked at the payphone, it sat there on the wall and collected money. It looked like a pretty good business if you could own a payphone. Well, it turned out at some of the convenience stores, those phones did $2,000 a week or
Wow.
$1,000 a week. And all they did was take money all day long. I liked that business. Low overhead, well, at least I thought it was. Low overhead, low maintenance, high cash. But the more you research it, the more you find out what it's really like. If it looks easy and it sounds easy, it probably isn't. So you need to look and get more into what it's like. Go work for someone who's in that business, figure out what it really takes and say, can I do this? But that was my first foray into my own company. I had worked for a long distance company, and then I got to start this magazine on the payphone industry. And the real business if in a new industry, buyers need sellers, sellers need buyers, and the one in the middle that gives everyone the information, he becomes the richest first. So you want to become rich first, find a new industry like interactive television. It's going to be huge. Figure out a niche of information you can start providing about what's coming, because you'll know more than the person who interviews you at the Wall Street Journal. That makes you the expert.
Right.
So I've actually done interviews where I don't know very much, but I know more than who I'm talking to, which makes me the expert in the conversation.
It's great. Okay, so then you started with Telecar World. You had different magazines as well.
I had a number of magazines. I had Payphone Magazine. I had Voice Processing Magazine, which is all about voicemail. And let me give you a little hint. For those of you who are young and trying to figure out your niche, if it's really boring, it's probably really profitable, because people don't want to get into the boring businesses, but the ones that sound boring probably have the most money attached because you can charge more for the information. If you're going to say, I'm going to go open a shoe store, well, everyone does that. You've got a lot of competition, drives prices down. If, on the other hand, you open a magazine or a news site called Interactive Television's Future, or the future of interactive television, doesn't sound so exciting, but it's got a lot of value because the buyers were very hot on getting that information so they can get to the next step and beat their competitor. So the more boring, the more value is the way I like to put it.
Okay, so if you're just starting, for you, right, when you were starting this magazine about, payphones, right? Now, payphone, like prepaid phone cards, you didn't have, you weren't the expert to begin with. How did you become an expert? Were you just talking to people who knew better, like a little bit more than you?
Yeah.
Uh,
You find experts in the field that you are researching. You must research everything you want to get into unless you want to use time and money to fail. So the comment is really true. Plan to fail if you fail to plan, or they usually say fail to plan if you plan to fail. You must plan your game plan. And a general in an army thinks about every option and then goes in. If he just went, he'd get killed. You're going to have the same function in business. Everyone wants that money. You've got to figure out how to get it without putting yourself at risk. And the way to do that is through information. So you get to start with your database of people that want to know everything about the subject you're going to research. So if I started Voice Processing Magazine, sounds boring, but it's the voicemail industry and the voice response industry, which is touch tone access to data. And that meant you could pick up a phone and push 1 for this information, push 2 for that information. That's pretty powerful stuff. So I found everyone I could that was making and trying to sell those products. They were very willing to talk to me because they want to promote their products,
Right.
and that got me very knowledgeable.
right.
Well, if I knew the 10 players and they each told me what they're doing and I can remember the best of the best, I'm probably going to be up there ranking with them or higher when it comes time for an interview to talk about the industry.
Okay.
So the more people you know, the more in the space, the more you learn, the more you become the smartest guy in the room.
Right. So then how did you monetize those magazines?
We put out information and put ads around it. Now, the fallacy today is you can put up information and just throw some Google ads on there. That's not easy unless you have a heck of a lot of people looking at those ads. And that's not always the case when you're starting out. A lot of your young followers are very smart, much smarter than me online. But I go to people like that to help me. The plug that I want in your video today is I want help promoting my book, because you guys that are watching this know the game. You know how to get followers. You know how to get the word out. And I want this book to teach people like you how to really make the big bucks. So knowing my weakness, I would always hire people that knew what I didn't know. I just knew that I needed it. So if you're really good at internet marketing, but you don't know operations, you don't like to deal with the day-to-day stuff, you need to find someone who likes that, because there's a lot of people who do. And at that point, 1 and 1 is 3. You're good, they're good, but together you're really good. And that's what you need to find to be successful. You really can't do it on your own.
Okay, so yeah, let's follow up on that. Obviously, a teen is very good with, let's say, search marketing, but they're not very good with finances, right? What could they do to really sell their idea, sell a vision, right? Because you're talking about being someone who can sell to the other person to make them join you.
Yeah.
What was it that you did that got everyone on board, to join
Well,
your team?
if you go in and I'm giving a speech tonight to a big crowd, and when I go in, I know certain things before I walk in the room. Like your group, they're teens, they're 15 to 20 years old. A lot of them own their website. They probably know internet better than all of their parents. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And so you can address the crowd in that way. What your parents know, most of them know numbers. They have to keep books. They have to keep accounting for their household. They have to have a budget. That's who you turn to and say, hey, can you help me plan a budget? Because they're going to tell you things like overhead, utilities, computers, breakdown. What do you do when you're sick? It's all based on the questions that they know to ask that you don't know to ask. You may know the answers, but you don't even know the questions to ask. So I love to say to entrepreneurs that say, I'm making $20,000 a year. I'm so excited. I say, do you pay yourself? They say, no. And I say, well, if you went and got a job, how much would you make? They'd say probably 40,000 a year. I'd say, then you're losing 20,000 a year because you're making 20 and you would make 40 if you were somewhere else. And that upsets them, but it's the way you have to look at the game. Now, the difference is you're building equity if you're building a database. The number one thing all of you must learn on the internet is to build your database. We all know that, but remember, the more you know about your clients, the more you know about the subject, the more you're going to make. It's really important.
Okay, so I really want to get to, obviously, business.com. You do talk about it in the book, but give us a quick rundown of how that happened, like why you decided to buy business.com.
Isn't it funny? All the young people love to hear the business.com story because it really is a get-rich story.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of luck and a lot of planning, but the luck overtakes the planning real quick. My sister brought me up to the University of Texas to speak to her class. And I was speaking with the CFO of Federal Express. So the two of us were in her class speaking to 30 MBA students. And when we were done, we went to her office and she said, look at this thing. It's really interesting. It's called the internet. And what is it? Well, let me just show you. And she showed it to me and I said, how do you get one of those names? I don't know why I knew that, but I had been in the real estate business and it seemed obvious if you needed to type in a name to get somewhere, that name was really important if no one else could own it. So we looked up Hertz.com and we looked up Avis.com. One of them was available, one of them wasn't. I don't remember. They were free. And when she said they were free, I thought, then they can't be valuable. They're free. Why should I even bother? But I went back to my home and I couldn't stop thinking about it because it made sense. So I started playing with it and it took 6 months before I bought my first domain name. And then I bought a bunch of them because by then it had just become $75 to own it for 2 years. That was the initial cost. After free, the government started charging to manage all these names. So I want to make sure you're not frozen. I have a frozen screen for you.
I'm good.
Okay. I bought a bunch of names. I bought e-business. I bought e-tickets. I bought e-radio. I bought e-blue book. A lot of things with e because IBM was running a commercial on e-business.
Right.
And it seems intelligent. Now, at the time, it made sense. In the newspaper, there were 4 subjects: news, weather, sports, business. Those were the names you want. They were all taken. But the one on business was owned by a guy who sold telephones. He was in Europe. And I contacted him and said, would you be interested in selling me your name? He said, no. I said, well, I'd make it worth your while. He said, you couldn't. I said, I'll pay you $75,000 for it. He said, I'll sell it to you. About a week later, when it was all arranged with the lawyers and the papers were drawn up, he said to me, I've decided I don't want to sell it unless you give me $150,000. So I went to my dad and I said, what do I do? And we decided to give him the $150,000. Now the plan was to do a magazine called business.com, which for that domain name could still work. We did the transaction, and needless to say, I held on to it, and 4 years later, I got an offer for $1 million, and I contacted that guy's competitor and said, look, he wants to sell it for $1 million. He wants to buy it for $1 million. What do you think I should do? He said, I'll give you $2 million. The other guy said, I'll give you $3 million. I'll give you $4 million. At the end of the day, one day, I had one guy buying business.com for $7.5 million and another one buying a similar domain for $10 million. Money was flowing. They were cash rich with venture capital. They realized that this was real estate and it was going away, and those domains were extremely valuable. And I put them in a competition with one another and drove the price up. And in one day we did $17.5 million.